Before the Seven Kingdoms, before the Iron Throne, there was Dorne. 12,000 years ago, the first men crossed the land bridge from Essos to here. Of course, they were men, so they soon broke it. Then, while their cousins to the north built kingdoms, the Dornish squabbled over land, water, and wives. For centuries. Until Nymeria, a warrior princess in Essos. She led a fleet of 10,000 ships across the narrow sea to Dorne. Almost all of the petty lords made it clear that she wasn't welcome. All but one, Mors of House Martell. He saw in her a strength to match any man, including his rivals. After she accepted his marriage offer, she set fire to her ships. For 50 leagues, the coast was bright as day, and in the burning light, Princess Nymeria named Mors Martell the Prince of Dorne, in the style of her people. Dorne would be her home, or her grave. For many years, Nymeria and Mors waged war against all rivals. The Jordanes, Blackmonts, Corgyles, and even the mighty House Ironwood. They sent no fewer than 6 self-styled kings to the wall in golden chains. After Mors fell in battle, Nymeria took command of his armies and united Dorne. In 2 years, she ruled for 27 more, and though she married again, those husbands were little more than counselors and consorts. Dorne was Nymeria, and Nymeria was Dorne. She survived a dozen attempts on her life, put down 2 rebellions, and threw back 2 invasions. And when at last she died, her eldest child succeeded her, her daughter, not her son. And Dorne followed her because Nymeria had proven that women were equal to men, if not better. Unbowed, unbent, unbroken. The words of House Martell, the words of Dorne. Men may forget, but women always remember. When we were divided, Nymeria united us. When we were invaded, Meria defended us.
Westeros has mighty rivers, but none of them compare to the Rhoyne. It is said that there is no stream or puddle in western Essos but drains to Mother Rhoyne. No doubt an exaggeration. Until one sees the river, at its widest, a man in the center can't see a shore to either side. The greatest of Mother Rhoyne's children were the Rhoynar, a civilization as ancient and grand as old Guise. Fishers, traders, scholars, workers of wood, stone and metal. The Rhoynar raised their elegant cities from the headwaters of the Rhoyne down to her mouth, each lovelier than the last. For many centuries, the Rhoynar lived in relative peace. When invaders swept down from the hills, the Rhoynar, women and men, would don silver-scaled armor, fish-head helms, tall spears, and turtle-shell shields. If the enemy did not laugh themselves away, it was said that Mother Rhoyne would whisper the enemy's secrets to her children, and the Rhoynish wizards could raise watery walls to drown their foes. Whatever magic the Rhoynar may have had, it wasn't enough. When Valyrian colonists first arrived, the Rhoynar embraced them, for all men were welcome to share the bounty of Mother Rhoyne. Perhaps a water people should have been more cautious of strangers who exalted fire and blood. Legend has it that one day the Valyrians netted and butchered one of the giant turtles the Rhoynar held sacred. As a result, thousands were killed or enslaved, cities and towns were burned, drowned, and rebuilt. In these wars, the Valyrians emerged as victorious more often than not. The princes of the Rhoynish cities, fiercely proud of their independence, fought alone, whilst the Valyrian colonies aided one another. Eventually, the Rhoynish princes ceased their squabbling and united behind Prince Garin, who led the largest army Essos had ever seen, against 100,000 Valyrian colonists, 100 war elephants, and 3 dragon lords. Thousands burned, but thousands more sheltered in the shallows of the river, whilst the Rhoynish wizards raised enormous water spouts against the foe's dragons. Rhoynish archers brought down 2 of the dragons, whilst the 3rd fled, wounded. And thereafter, the Rhoynar named Garin the Great. But Mother Valyria proved just as caring as Mother Rhoyne. When Garin the Great marched his army against Volantis, 300 Valyrian dragons descended from the sky. Tens of thousands burned whilst others rushed into the river, but the fires burned so hot that the water boiled and turned to steam. Garin the Great was captured alive and made to watch as Valyrians butchered every last man, so many that their blood turned the great harbor of Volantis red as far as the eye could see. Then they forced Garin to watch as they marched on his own city and enslaved all the women and children his army had left behind. The singers claim that Prince Garin called out Mother Royne to curse the Valyrians, and she in turn flooded the city with foul waters and a damp fog that caused the skin of the Valyrians to harden and crack, and thus was born Grayscale.
Few afflictions are more feared than grayscale, and far past the point of reason. A legend calls it Prince Garin's curse, after an ancient eastern prince whom the Valyrians hung in a cage and forced to watch the immolation of his city and people. As his city burned under dragon flame, this prince called on his god for vengeance, and a thick fog of foul humors rose from the Royne to smother the Valyrians with grayscale. But if diseases could be called down by the vengeful, we'd have no health in the world. More likely the disease predates the Valyrians entirely, confined to some remote region of Essos, and only spread throughout the world once the Valyrians linked the continent with roads and dragons.
Fearing a similar fate, another Roynish ruler, Princess Nymeria, led her own people into every ship, skiff and raft they had, and fled Essos. Eventually, after much hardship, they landed in sun-swept and bone-dry Dorne.
Unbowed, unbent, unbroken. The words of House Martell, a promise to our enemies and a challenge to our lovers. Thousands of years ago, the warrior queen Nymeria crossed into Dorne from Essos, fleeing the dragon lords of Valyria. After she landed, she burned her ships, all 10,000 of them, so no cowards could slink home. What a woman! Dornish in spirit before she ever was in flesh. She was lucky to land in Dorne, where powerful women are not locked away in septs and the beds of old men. My ancestor Mors Martell saw her and desired her, and proved that where armies fail, a tongue may succeed. Wedding his strength to hers, his spear to her son, they subdued all his rivals together. After the tradition of her people, House Martell then ruled Dorne as princes, not kings. Unless the eldest child was a daughter, for unlike the rest of Westeros, our loyalty isn't commanded by a cock. We follow a prince or a princess Martell just the same.